Files I'm going to be using are from Galactic Armory. They are $20 whole. But the files are pretty good for me already slicing them, looking at them and scaling them. But if you want a free helmet file, then this Halo Reach Noble 6 helmet by this guy. It's here. I haven't downloaded it to see what it looks like. So now we're just going to jump to Cura using the Ender 3 Pro for this. It's a standard 220 by 220 by 250 build plate size. And we're just going to go here and use the separated version. We're just going to grab all these files and then put them in Cura. And then these optional forehead plate mount, optional forehead plate, and then optional helmet brim. You don't need those as shown up by optional, but I will be printing them just for my own helmet. But you will need visor brim. Alright, and now I've already gone and scaled this. I know what to scale it to, so I'm going to select all models, and then for me, I'm going to go to scale, change it from 100 down to 90% scale. Now everything shrinks quite a bit, but it will almost definitely still fit, because it's a huge helmet to begin with. For this back plate, you shouldn't really need to do anything with it. It should be just fine. But I'm going to bump up the layer height just a bit, because I know my Ender's pretty good. And then 7% infill with gyroid. And then speed, just keep it at 50. Kind of just because it's fast enough, but still with good quality, especially on a piece like this where it'll just be going back and forth a lot. And then I just have retraction and combing on. And then support, I'm using tree with 0% infill and a 65 overhang angle. You shouldn't really need anything much lower than that because your printer should print fine like this with that 65. And then I'm just using a 5% support interface density just because that breaks away from my print pretty good. And then the raft, I just have it going nice and slow to lay down all the plastic. And then wrapped extra margin. If you don't have it at something you can actually grab, you're probably definitely going to need some sort of tweezers or something because it won't be more than like outside the base of the model. So 2mm works fine, and then you can change top layer thickness. That matters. And then the dome is where it starts to get tricky, as it does not fit on the build plate. Even if we turned it at a 45-degree angle, it still wouldn't fit. So we're going to go to rotate. And I can just rotate this back, center it again, rotate it back a little more. Now we can see we're poking through the top of it. So we'll go down to snap rotation, turn that off, tilt it down just a couple degrees. Just move it back until this little shadow is... The shadow down here will show you where you can print. So now it's in there. Just like that, fitting on an Ender 3 at 90%. So it should be just fine like this. And now, with this jaw piece, even at 90%, it is huge. Absolutely massive. So it says it's 240 241.5 millimeters on the x-axis. So what I could do is just rotate this. Oop, let me set that back to snap. Just rotate this guy 90 degrees and then it would fit. But we'd be getting absolutely terrible quality on each side. And then it'd just be filling all up here with support, all down there, and it wouldn't be great. It would be really annoying to sand and smooth. So we're going to rotate it back down, like something like this, and then recenter it, turn it at 45, and just kind of maneuver it to 0, 0. Even, probably turn it up a little more. We don't want it to exceed the Z limit. Because if it exceeds the Z limit, then you just straight up cannot print it. Oops. I don't know how I did that. I don't remember how I oriented this last time. I think I need to turn it more this way. Yeah, it's almost there. Center it. Oh, we're just going to do that and that. Now the scale is just above that 220 that we need to get it down to. Just above. So I'm just going to rotate it back. I'm going to rotate it like this again. And rotate it back just a little bit. Rotate it 45. That's not 45. Rotate it about 45 degrees. Now, if we look here, it's just over 220 by 220. So, what I'm gonna do. Right, so what I've done is I went and I looked at where the nozzle actually touches, and then the bed is not actually 220 by 220. It's a little bit bigger than 220 by 220. I made sure that this nozzle right here could touch both of these edges or get very close to it. Then what I did is I went up here, went to Manage Printers, Machine Settings, I upped it just a little to 225 to not 55, to 225 by 225. And with just that simple change, I can move this back just a little, and over there just a smidgen. Or is it still hitting? Ah, over there. So, and then this is another thing with the raft. May have to change it. May have to change the. There we go. Perfect. So this is how I'm printing it now. Just vertical like this. Because sanding up here with a power sander should be really easy, even with this curve. You may need to adjust to this raft extra margin. So I knocked it down from 2 millimeters to 1, but it should still pop off just fine. Especially since most of this model is not going to be touching it, and it'll just be support in these areas. And then you could definitely go and block out some of this stuff. Like up there probably doesn't need it. But I think it'll be just fine without it. Without blocking it off. Shouldn't use too much more material. So these right here. These prints right here. If we go to rotate. And I'll, didn't mean to do that. What? So I'm actually going to have these two little guys that go on the side of like the chin, up just over there. Going to have them be vertical like this, so that the curve is nice and almost straight. But for these two side details, I'm going to go here to rotate, and then select face to align. I'm going to select the longer face on it. So for then it would be there, and then for this guy, it'd be this face right here. I'm just going to move him over there. So as we can see, will require some support, but it'll break away just fine, especially because they're relatively small. And then this is the last necessary piece right here, this visor brim. It's the last necessary piece for it. So I'm actually going to go to Auto Orient. You can get it up here in the marketplace. It's just a little add-on. Calculate optimal printing orientation. Oh, just like that. Okay. So this should slice just fine, but because it's a smaller piece, and then that goes with these pieces over here too, the detail, I would recommend knocking your print quality, depending on your nozzle. I would recommend turning it from 1.8, so 0.18, maybe down to 0.12, because that'll provide a better print than the 1.8. Will take longer though. For small prints, it shouldn't matter too much. Alright, and then this visor right here, just gonna move it, scooch it forward, just make sure everything can fit on the build plate, and then my brain would turn on, and then all this should be fine. These two pieces, so if in there gets supported, we can just break that off really easily. But then there's all these pockets in this visor, this extra visor brim. So I'm gonna go see what this will look like with auto orientation, and it's still printing just like how it was before. So oh wait, I selected the wrong thing. And sometimes this auto orientation is kind of dumb. So it did keep it just like that anyway. But printing this like something like that, how the auto orientation had before, that's really not great for just wouldn't be great for anything really. So I'm gonna take this, rotate it, I don't know about there. I'm actually going to, because I know I did this before, I'm going to calculate that. And then this actually uses just a little bit of support on the bottom here, but then it really doesn't do anything else. Just support there, and then that should be fine for the entire model, except up there, but that's fine. Now that we have everything sliced and stuff, we can now jump to the printing and or sanding stages. Alright, so I'm here with all my 3D printed parts. These are the 3 extra accessories. This is the main helmet dome. This is the visor rim. These are the chin sort of pieces. And this is the back plate. And these right here are the extra details. So we're actually going to be kind of discarding the details and these extra pieces because we won't need them for what we're doing right now. We're just assembling the main body of the helmet. To assemble the main body of the helmet, we're going to need our soldering iron, or you could just use super glue. And then we're gonna need a Dremel or something just to sand down some edges. And then I like to have some pliers so I can just pluck off any remaining support bits. So for super rough edges, like the top of this piece here, you could, and you probably should, just take it off nice and slow with these sorts of pliers. But there's all these really rough spots. So we definitely need to use the soldering iron so that we don't have extreme gaps everywhere. So we're going to want to up the temperature of our soldering iron just to get it nice and hot. Then we're going to give it a minute to heat up. Alright, so now there's all these edges here, super rough edges. So we're just going to take the soldering iron, just go along, just try and smooth out the edges, just nice and gently. Just look at what a difference that made compared to over here. I guess over here, because it's focus. There. Look at that difference. Just keep going along, nice and slow and careful. Try not to dig the soldering iron down into the part. We're not trying to fuse it back together, we're just trying to melt the edges, make them smooth. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can get a better bond between pieces with fewer gaps. Looks like the soldering iron got turned off for some reason. So we've smoothed out this side a good amount, so we can just take it along the edges, start start smoothing them just a bit. Go back up here. I need to lower the temperature a bit. There's flies. Appears that 380 is definitely too hot, so I'm setting it down to 280. Just go nice and slow with it. Alright, so now we're done with this piece. We're going to take these two pieces and actually, we're going to wait on that for just a second. So, here's our big dome. Here's our little visor guy. So, I'm going to put the soldering iron down. If we flip this over, I'm going to keep this on. Just try and hold it on the best we can. So let's take this, little solder, I'll melt it right in there. Alright, so now I've got the back plate soldered on. There is a gap in here, you can see through it a bit, but I will be filling that in later with filler. So now, I had a pretty bad layer shift on this space right here on the chin. So I had to break it apart. So what I'm gonna end up doing is putting one side on, melting that in place, and then I'll put the other side on, and then I'll melt those two sides together. So I'm gonna do that now. So I went through sanding and power sanding with 80 grit sandpaper, then went through and made for the visor and the forehead plate. After I had done that, I filled rough spots and gaps in the helmet with Bondo spot putty, let that dry, and sanded it. Then I sprayed a covering of filler primer over all the pieces. After the filler primer had dried, I sanded it and took it outside, but the lens fogged up and you couldn't really see much. But the paint I used was Duplicolor Perfect Match Ingot. It says it replicates 4 colors. You will likely need multiple coats of the Perfect Match in order to get a good coverage, because it's a bit of a thin paint, almost like a tint. But before that, for the black, I used a Krylon Gloss Black after I masked off all the pieces. You just want to go over with light dust coats at first, just to layer up on top of the helmet. And then after all the paint was dry, I used a Rust-Oleum matte clear coat. Then after all the clear coat was dried, I glued all the pieces on and then did a dry brushing of silver. The dry brushing is to emulate scuffs and scratches on the high spots of the armor, or in this case the helmet. You don't really want to put it in deep places or on big round surfaces, because those would be marked into dents instead of just scratches. After that, I did a black wash, which is just some black paint mixed in with some water, and I just use an old food can for that. You just want to brush on your helmet or other part
and then wipe it off with a paper towel after just a few seconds. You want to leave smears that look like they've been wiped at, but also not like they're deliberate. You almost want to act like you're actually trying to clean the helmet. The last thing we're going to need is a visor for the helmet, because otherwise everyone would be able to see our eyes, and it just wouldn't look that great. So for the visor, I used a PET sheet, tinted with some gold, I think they call it gold silver window tint. So what you're going to want to do is lay down some paper towels to protect your surface from water, just keep it from getting too wet. And then you want to lay down your PET sheet. What I do is I spray it with some water and then lay down my window tint and use an old card or something else flat like that to push out all the bubbles. And then what I do is once it's all nice and smooth and there's no bubbles, I hold it up to the helmet and get a rough idea of how much I need to trim off. So then I trim that off and then put it back, and then I start trimming even more. But be careful not to trim too much of the visor, because otherwise you would have to completely remake the visor. Otherwise it would have weird gaps in it. Once the visor was done, I just hot glued it into the helmet. Once you've done that, or you've used Velcro, like I ended up doing later, once you've done that, then your helmet's all done. Alright guys, I hope you liked the video, and I hope you enjoy your helmet if you made one as you followed along. It was honestly really fun to make, and it came out even better than I expected. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.